Welcome to Research Renaissance, presented by the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust. Embark on a journey into the forefront of cutting-edge brain science as we feature insightful discussions with a diverse array of guests, from early career researchers pioneering groundbreaking science to influential voices in investment communities, policymaking, and research institutions. Together, we delve into neurological diseases, their causes, treatments, and the quest for cures. Join us in advancing our understanding of the brain and addressing its ailments. Welcome to Research Renaissance. I'm Deborah Westphal, your host and guide through the fascinating future of the brain. Joining me today is Marissa Pettit Jones, the Director of Business Development at Genentech. Marissa is responsible for guiding strategic business initiatives and partnerships at Genentech. She is also the co-founder of Nucleate. Today, we will be discussing innovative collaborations and therapeutic advancements. So let's dive in. Welcome, Marissa.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Deb.
I think we met not very long ago at a Tamir Foundation event, and it was really nice for us to get the introduction. And you're fascinating, some of the things that you're doing, and so I'm really looking forward to this discussion here. So I think let's just start with telling us a little bit about Genentech. What is the company, and what does it do?
Sure. Genentech is a biotech company headquartered in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And at Genentech, we research and develop new treatments for patients with devastating diseases across therapeutic areas. So including neurology, but also oncology, ophthalmology, immunology, and cardiovascular and metabolic diseases. And Genentech is actually a part of the Roche Group, which is a long-standing Swiss company established over 125 years ago. And it has a unique company structure in that way, in that Roche has divisions for both pharmaceuticals and diagnostics, and therefore aims to support the patient along their entire journey from diagnosis through treatment.
So what kind of got you into biotech? Because you've had an interesting journey so far. You really started more, if I understand correctly, you started more in the business side and then went to strategy consulting, and now you're here. What was kind of the fascination and why biotech?
Yeah, I originally studied biomedical engineering when I was in college at Yale. And I fell into that major because I found the courses were just fascinating, learning about the science of how the human body works and how biotech innovation is making such substantial advances to help human health. Just thought it was fascinating for both the science and the impact on people. But I found that through my research in the lab at that point in time, that being in the lab, conducting experiments was not my strength. I enjoyed working really collaboratively with people in my day-to-day activities and thinking strategically about the implications of what we could do. So I enjoyed designing the experiments and then thinking about the implications, but the actual being in the lab was not my personal strength. So I got the advice from some mentors of mine to go learn about business and then look for careers at the intersection of science and business. And that's what led me into management consulting and then to pursue my MBA. And I'm grateful that I was able to then find my current role in business development to kind of bring it all together and be more at that intersection of science and business.
How did being a strategic consultant, and I think it was a Bain and Company, that because you do a lot of projects, was it across industry, and then you were able to kind of hone in on where you really were going to land, or were you really just kind of focused and they placed you in that line of business?
Yeah, Bain, you're correct. I was at Bain and I worked there across industries. So I did some work in healthcare with more of the health insurance space, some with biotech, as well as some projects that were more in the educational space and some projects that were more in traditional consumer goods. So, very wide spectrum of things. And I feel like I learned a lot that I still use day to day in my work about how to learn about new areas and come up to speed quickly and ask questions of experts, and how to think strategically about, how to prioritize and build a strategic plan. But I felt, to be honest with you, quite far from the science. And so I think that's what part of what made me realize that strategy consulting wasn't going to be the right long-term career path for me. And maybe I can share also the things about biotech that I think really drew me to it, that made me want to pursue it more with more focus than my strategy consulting. There's kind of two areas. One is that the impact on patients, I think, is really motivating. I'm surrounded by people in my current career at Genentech and broader in this field, of people who are working because they know someone, a family member or a friend who has suffered or is suffering from devastating disease, and the ability to try to do a small part to help that, I think, is something that draws many of us into biotech. And the second piece is, and I know I commented on this a bit earlier, but just the pace of innovation is really exciting. I think that there is so much that we still don't understand about human biology and the pathology of disease, but the field is learning new insights at really a lightning pace. And I think I got a taste of that in college and have gotten even more exposed to that through my work in business development at Genentech, that there's just so much happening.
Yeah, it sounds like a great fit where you're at, because you mentioned when you were that researcher, to be in a peer researcher just wasn't going to be a fit, and there really is kind of this chasm between that research and then where you really are, which is in that innovation and getting things to market. And I think everybody kind of thinks about the patient and thinks about the disease, but you're way closer to that end state of helping individuals. Is that that entrepreneur, that innovation journey? You're kind of in a good area, but can you explain some of the challenges that that kind of brings when you're kind of bridging those two worlds?
Yeah, I think that I agree with you. There's many challenges there in finding kind of the right ways to bridge the gaps, finding this kind of bridges into Nucleate. It's okay. That I think that's part of the reason why Nucleate has found it's filled such a gap in the ecosystem to help with these challenges of how do you bridge the gap from an innovative idea or breakthrough or research to then getting something to patients, and all of the steps that need to happen along the way, from forming a company that is an entity that can then be a vehicle for that innovation, and then bringing that forward and finding places along the way where you can work with partners such as Genentech, or there's many other types of partners, but that can help accelerate that work or augment that work and overcome some of the challenges that are inevitable, because it's a very difficult field. We all know the success rates in getting a drug to be successful and approved and help people it's a high bar with many failures along the way. And so bringing together the right sets of people to provide expertise and partner in overcoming those challenges, I think, is a real asset to the field.
Well, let's just jump into Nucleate, because I had never come across that and until we were in San Diego where we met. And it's a fascinating group, and it's only been around for a couple of years. What is it? How did it get started? You were a co-founder. So, you kind of talked a little bit about the need, but go ahead and reiterate on what Nucleate is and what kind of makes it unique.
I'd be happy to. So, Nucleate is a 501c3 nonprofit that is run by students for students, mostly focused on graduate level students. And the goal of Nucleate is to empower the next generation of biotech leaders through open access programming, through networks, through educational classes, and the like. So since its founding, it was founded actually in 2018. Nucleate has a flagship program called the Activator, which is an incubator type program focused on empowering entrepreneurs on their journey through these first critical steps of forming a biotech company and bringing innovation forward. And that program has now led to the creation of 78 companies with over $310 million raised by those companies, which is a stat we're very excited to see. And Nucleate does not take any equity in these companies, for clarity. It's really free to participate in the programming. It's a free and open to all model. And yes, as you mentioned, I co-founded Nucleate back in 2018 when I was in my MBA program at Harvard Business School. And I found myself as a student looking for a network and for resources to engage with, to learn more about biotech entrepreneurship, and felt somewhat surprised actually that such a resource didn't already exist. I mean, there were some programs available through the Harvard Biotech Club or through a few different Harvard institutions, but nothing that really brought students together with this shared interest and brought those students together with the Boston ecosystem, which is so thriving, such a world leading ecosystem to bring everyone together in this educational way. And so I actually discussed this need with Sufyan, who was the head of the Harvard Biotech Club at the time. And through that conversation, the kind of idea for Nucleate was born. And the first year, we ran a very small program focused just on Harvard students, bringing them together for a series of workshops and hands-on mentoring with people in the industry. And then the second year, students from MIT and other Boston area schools reached out requesting to participate. And so we expanded it to be Boston wide. And after that, we had students from schools across the US and even internationally requesting to participate in Nucleate programming. So the organization grew with this really wonderful organic growth at a faster pace than I ever could have imagined. So we now have students participating from, I think it's almost 150 schools.
Wow.
It really has taken off. And I'm currently involved on the board of directors as the vice chair of the board. So I'm not day-to-day running Nucleate anymore. It remains fully run by students, and they deserve all the credit for the incredible growth that has gotten it to where it is today. But I actively advise with the goal of helping the organization to continue to grow and improve and deliver on its mission.
Yeah. How does that work that is still run by students, because students graduate, they go on and maybe they're running the companies that they're starting, but how does that work to where it doesn't become kind of a stable, institution with people that are there for a long time and, more rigid? How does that work?
It's certainly a challenge. It's something that we've had to think through really deeply as a board of how do we ensure that Nucleate has the continuity and is able to maintain the identity it has, the growth trajectory, the quality of what Nucleate provides when you have leadership turning over quite frequently. And I think that's a place where through kind of codifying best practices, we have a really robust system for trying to record everything and reflect very frequently on what has happened, where are we headed, and it's a role that the board really helps play as well in driving that continuity. And I think that the plus side we've seen is, although we've been sad every time a group of leaders kind of moves on because they're graduating, it's also been fantastic to bring new leaders on board with a fresh perspective and fresh ideas. And I think it helps the organization to prevents it from getting to a place where it's just, okay, now we're rinse and repeat, do the same thing this year that we did last year, but rather continuing to think about, okay, how can we do things differently or better and bring a fresh perspective to that?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because you're constantly working on the problem of the startup rather than as the leaders mature, they start working on a different group of problems, which is now the maturation of companies, and then it's the growth of the company, and it's the transition of the company, or whatever that may be. By always having that youthful leadership, I guess, you continue to work that problem set of how do we even get out the gate with this innovation.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have shifted the strategy over the years from being, what's our growth plan to now what's our strategy for our global footprint. We're kind of in many of the major hubs and minor hubs. And so now it's really much more about how do we think strategically about maintaining or shifting that global footprint to support the organization.
Yeah. 6 years, 310 million, 78 companies. That's quite successful. What is that? And you may not have the numbers, but is that, 60% transition? Is that what is that? Because how many out of that 6 years, how many companies, how many ideas, how many were thoughts to a company? Just, roughly a percentage.
Yeah, I think it is more than half of the student teams that go through the program end up coming out as companies. I know, and I should caveat that I'm not 100% sure on that
Yeah.
number, but I think ballpark
Yeah.
that's where we're at. I know from the first cohort that I was very closely involved with, it was actually higher. I think we had almost all of the teams move forward to forming companies and raising money. And I think that's kind of the trend that's continued of teams that join and participate. And it's quite an intensive program. They really have the intent to move it forward and continue that journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. And congratulations on that. And for you to see that need and take the risk yourself to kind of, put that out there and then walk that line to innovate. And you must be really proud watching it, even if it is a little bit from afar, but being on the board, that must be kind of a proud thing.
I certainly feel so much excitement and I feel so proud of the leaders that have continued to grow Nucleate and think through how can it help the next generation. And I think by continuing to be led by students but supported by all those who have left the student period of their lives, we have this nice network of support around Nucleate of boots on the ground, of students who have a pulse on what's really needed at this moment in time to support the community, but also all of the shared experience of the alumni that continues to gather for events or pay it forward with mentoring, etc.
Yeah. Well, it must also help your kind of your day-to-day job too, because, you said at the very beginning, it's very, very hard to get a drug out or a therapeutic out there for some of these diseases, that there's a lot of failures. So if you can do things up front with the ideas, with some of the innovation to try to make them successful, it helps downstream for that more mature company to really kind of scale it up and get it to market. So that's wonderful that you're working both sides of it. I'd like to kind of just in that day to day, you're the director of business development. What does that entail, and what what does your day-to-day kind of look like? And I imagine you're working acquisitions, you're working partnerships. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I work in business development in both identifying and then evaluating and executing on partnership opportunities. And as you said, that includes acquisitions or collaboration agreements or licensing deals. So starting kind of at the beginning of the process, I kind of think of it as a funnel. At the top of the funnel, we're looking for opportunities for partnerships, and we look for those by going to conferences such as specific partnering conferences like the JP Morgan conference that happens in January in San Francisco every year, or the Bio conference that happens in June each year, as well as more scientific conferences like ASCO or AACR in oncology, for example. We're also bringing things into the top of the funnel here through relationships that we have. So relationships with venture capital funds that are investing in potential partners, or through other connections we have. For example, R&D leaders at Genentech that meet new biotech companies through their work, then collaborate with us on bringing things into the funnel. And then moving down the funnel for partnerships that we move forward as being of interest to us, I would say we evaluate them and carry them forward in three ways. The first way is thinking about our strategy. So does a partnership opportunity align with our internal R&D strategy such that the partnership has the potential to enrich or accelerate our ongoing R&D? And so if it's on strategy, it moves forward. But sometimes also if it's not on strategy, it provokes really interesting discussions in our organization about, should we reevaluate our strategy? Our strategy is not set in stone, but rather adapts as we have new information or we see new innovation to consider. So there's a lot of strategy discussions there that I think my strategy consulting background also helps me. That's one aspect. The second aspect, of course, is the scientific diligence. So I work closely with colleagues in R&D to evaluate the scientific data around every partnering opportunity, going deeply into the full data package that's available, whether it's preclinical data or clinical data or data on a technology. And then the third aspect is the deal terms themselves. So evaluating, is there a path to alignment on a deal structure that feels like a win-win, synergistic for both sides, both in terms of financials as well as in terms of, the other parts of a deal structure, to try to build a partnership that everyone sees as beneficial.
How dynamic is that? Because you talked about what was fascinating to you was, kind of the impact on patients. That was the first, but then there was also this pace of innovation, and to be able to innovate the way you need to innovate, especially when it comes to some of these hard diseases, some of the increased knowledge that we're having about the diseases or the body, the human body, and then just the technology, whether that be, you're trying to bring in more AI or, big data or machine learning. How dynamic is that? Like, I don't know if you measure it by deals per year, partners by year. I mean, I would imagine just to keep up with that pace of innovation is pretty dynamic.
Couldn't agree more. It's incredibly dynamic. It's what keeps me on my toes and keeps the job exciting, is that, we're seeing new companies every year, and even the same companies are coming up with new innovation every year. And so that pace is what really helps drive the fact that our strategy needs to be dynamic and evolve as we see that innovation, and make sure that what we're working on is continuing to be at the cutting edge. And in that vein, a large part of our pipeline, I think it's over 50%, is part of a partnership in different ways. Maybe it's a technology that we licensed, or it's a molecule that we directly in-licensed. But I think we recognize as an organization that although we do, really great R&D here, I feel lucky to work with some of the best and brightest scientists. There's so much innovation happening outside our walls. And I think we really have the philosophy of wanting to follow the best innovation, no matter where it happens, if it's here or elsewhere. And so a significant portion of our pipeline and our drug development is impacted by partnerships to stay abreast of that innovation.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about what you said at the beginning of Roche being around for 120 some years. 120 years ago, it was less dynamic. You could do everything kind of in-house. It was, more of what was happening on the bench and trying to figure it out. And you didn't have those international markets possibly. And so I just think it's really kind of fascinating, the web of relationships that you have to build, stay, kind of ahead of. What kind of skills or expertise do you feel that kind of help you in your job to do that might have been not necessarily maybe 30, 40 years ago?
The comment you made also about the global relationships really rings true to me, in that, I have colleagues that I work with that are based in Asia or based in Europe or based in Boston and all around the world, because there's innovation happening everywhere, and wanting to make sure that we can see and participate in that is important. But the specific skills, I think that being a lifelong learner is one of the most important skills for people in my role, and that there's always something new to learn about, and having that curiosity and not being afraid to ask questions to learn as we go is really one of the most important skills as we try to map out partnership strategy and execute on that.
Yeah. So I want to return to something that you said about Nucleate being you're not taking equity in any of these startups. And, that's kind of fascinating because in the world of everything's about money and, it's to take, I can imagine you're doing that to give them the best chance of being successful, that you're not taking a part of it. But then in your role as a, work in strategy at Genentech, you do take ownership of some of these things. So, just kind of if there's, what is this equity free kind of motivation for that real front end? And then how maybe it doesn't translate to anything that you do as a more mature company that is, kind of relying on some of these innovations that are coming out of these startups?
It's a great question. I think that at the very earliest stages of innovation and forming a company, there are so many hurdles along that journey. And I think a lot of, especially first time founders or entrepreneurs that haven't been on that journey before, it's hard to know even where to begin. And so I think Nucleate's role is really to try to help in that point in time of giving people a roadmap, and therefore enabling ideas that are great ideas but might not have been able to make it forward, now able to make it forward, right? Able to find and see a path. And I think that Nucleate aims to do that in a way that is quite symbiotic, I would say, with the industry, in that everyone benefits from having more innovation, more companies. That's something that Genentech really benefits from. In fact, Genentech is a sponsor, as many other large pharma and other companies are, a sponsor of Nucleate, making a donation to them as a nonprofit, because we see value in supporting bringing more companies into the ecosystem, as well as supporting high potential talent that we want to see become biotech leaders in the industry that we interact with or we hire. There's a lot to benefit even without taking equity. And I think that if we were to take equity, that could potentially hamper the innovation because it's at such an early stage. It's so fledgling that these companies kind of are at a place where, just getting off the ground. But I think that later on, when a company is more established and has momentum and is developing something, they get to a point where they realize that there's only so much you can do as a small biotech company, right? It's really hard to imagine having a global commercial footprint, for example, as a small biotech company. There's, much you can do, but there starts to become a point where the best way to move the innovation forward, especially as therapeutics for patients, is to kind of team up, link hands arm in arm with a large pharma, for example, that has all of this ready to go, ready built infrastructure and capabilities for this really large scale development and commercialization. And so I think at that point, it shifts from mentoring and helping something get off the ground, which is Nucleate, to really let's partner on this hand in hand. We'll both invest, money and time, and we'll both set this up to reap the rewards on the other end. So I think there's a kind of a natural life cycle that requires different models of partnering and therefore different models of ownership and financials as well.
Yeah, you're describing, it's almost like you got to, these little fledgling companies are crawling, and you got to let them be able to stand and start learning to walk. You start engaging them when they're walking pretty well, and now they need to run, and you show them how to, how to do that. Is that kind of that cycle? Is that evolving in any interesting ways from your perspective, given the time, kind of this pressure and this pace of innovation? Are these relationships in this cycle? Is it, is there any interesting evolutions that you're seeing?
I think that we are seeing more companies that are sort of founder led. So, and I think Nucleate has played a role in that, but certainly hasn't been the only force, in that previously there was more of a model in which established venture capital firms would go find new technologies and then set up a company in a pattern that they followed, where they would have kind of an experienced entrepreneur or biotech leader take on this new technology and move it forward. And that's still happening, and I think that's fantastic for the industry. But in addition to that, I think now we're seeing more and more of people who it's their research and they want to bring it forward into a company, into biotech, and are finding the paths to do so and be entrepreneurs themselves. And therefore, this kind of founder-led movement has led to more companies than we had in the past.
So do you, when you acquire or when you partner, however you bring those into the umbrella of Genentech, do you let them still run that? Does it become a line of business where that founder is still running that, but they've got the support of the larger organization? Or is that kind of one of the ways that this founder-led evolution is happening?
Yes, I would say that the interesting thing about the work I do in business development is that no two deals are the same. Every single deal, it's a conversation with the potential partner about what are you really looking for? How do you think a partnership could most benefit your program or technology? And so we see partnerships that are very collaborative, where the partner is running most of the research and we provide some expertise or capabilities. Or on the other end of the spectrum, I should say, the partner would rather hand off everything, and they say, we've done what we can do, and now we need a partner such as a Genentech, Roche, to move this forward into, for example, a global large scale trial. So everyone has been that I've worked on has been pretty bespoke and fit for purpose. And I think that's an important part of the model, that we're not trying to shove any company into a cookie cutter, but rather think through really what's best for the situation.
What kind of diagnostics or therapeutics are you most excited about that, we may see in the next 5, 7, 10 years?
So much. I think maybe one thing that comes to mind is recently in the news, there was an announcement that the first clinical trial of in vivo CAR T therapy is going to begin soon, in which patients will receive an IV infusion, which will transform immune cells into cancer killers all inside their body. And it's just been fascinating to watch the pace of innovation there, because this is really the third generation of CAR T. The first generation was autologous CAR T, where a patient's own immune cells were extracted and then modified and then delivered back to the patient in a process that was very complicated and expensive, although certainly benefited patients. And so then there was a second wave of allogeneic CAR T, where researchers were using donor immune cells and kind of cloaking them to not provoke the immune system, and being able to then have one product that could go to many rather than an individualized product. And so it simplifies the process, but still has the complications associated with delivering something that's non-self to a patient. And so this new generation holds the potential to, I think, really radically improve access to CAR T in a much cheaper and scalable approach. And it's still very early for in vivo CAR T, but when you think about how quickly this has all happened, I mean, the first CAR T was approved in 2017, so not even 10 years ago. And now we're already on this third generation. That's just one of many things that excites me right now.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? Use your own body to fight off, fight off the disease. I was curious, at the beginning you said that what Genentech has is all these rare diseases, and you work on this real wide spectrum of diseases. Internally, are there groups that kind of cross that knowledge? Because as we learn more about the cardiovascular system and its response, or its relationship to the brain, or the immune system, or the lymphatic system with the brain or other parts of the body, is there collaboration internally that kind of crosses these verticals, if you would, to look for new knowledge, new learning, and possibly where one therapeutic or diagnostic could help somewhere else?
Absolutely. And to clarify, Genentech and Roche focus less on rare diseases and more on like large diseases that impact large patient populations.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, just to make sure I was clear.
Yeah.
But there's so much of that need for collaboration. And I think that's one thing that Genentech really emphasizes as a research organization is, everybody's still, on the same campus, in the same buildings, encouraged to collaborate. And it really has almost an academic feel in that people are publishing, people are giving science talks. We actually also bring in a lot of external speakers to speak about their research, and really trying to make sure that we find these places where there's overlap. One example that comes to mind is the immune system and the role the immune system plays in so many different disease areas, right? From immuno-oncology, tying into the CAR T we were just talking about, right? To many neurological diseases have a large immune component, to type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease. And so our immunology group really works cross-functionally with the other biologists and researchers to think through, to make sure learnings from one area are carried through and inform what we pursue in other areas.
Yeah. So technology, especially when we're doing this with humans, there's questions about some of these things, the ethicability of some kind of technologies, specifically around technologies, if you're going to implant things or if you're going to collect data on people. And I know this is a kind of an evolving area that we're trying to understand it, but I'm very fascinated with it and its relationship to the pace of innovation, because sometimes innovations outpace our answers to just because we can, should we? And so I was just kind of, not to put you on the spot, but just your opinion and what, where does that ethics or that consideration come into play with some of the decisions?
Yeah, the ethics are chiefly important, of course. I think that it's something we think about as an organization deeply about, how do you ensure that you're always following ethical principles, especially around, as you mentioned, using data in the way that, like patient data, in the way that the patient approves and is okay with, and never pushing the boundaries there. I think that's really important, and is something that I think we at Genentech treat as a bright line. It's not something that can or should be crossed. And I know in the industry, I've seen it come up recently, even outside of biotech, with all of the advances in machine learning and training these large language models on huge data sets. And it's something that we're at Genentech and Roche very invested in machine learning as it can be applied to drug discovery, but have been very careful and very clear on only training on data that does not have any of those ethical questions involved.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much to explore there that's not in the is this ethical question. It's not like we're lacking places that we can explore with machine learning or training these large language models. I think that the ability that the industry is able to generate, especially preclinical right now, preclinical data is just so fast. Our SVP of computation recently quoted, he gave a talk that I went to, and one quote from it that stood out to me is he thinks we'll generate more data in the next couple of years that can inform our models and machine learning than we've generated in the past 50 years. Like
Yeah.
it's just a accelerating pace.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't know what you don't know at the time unless you can start to allow ourselves to think about that. We didn't think about, as the internet was developed and social media was developed, some of these questions around ethical use and what about this and what about that. And here we are. And now we have congressional hearings, we have questions, we have, and then we add technology to it where there's implants in the brain. And, it's just, and it's a force of good, because if you can see inside and you can see diseases manifest inside the body, but there's questions about that. Like, how are we going to use that information if we have it? It's a fascinating kind of emerging area that, as we put that patient in the forefront, that has to be there too. So I was just kind of curious about that. What are you most excited about for the future? I mean, you talked a little bit about some of the science and the diagnostic or the therapeutic. What are you most excited about for the future?
I think, bringing it back full circle, maybe to a topic we discussed at the beginning, that there's still so much to be discovered about human biology and about the ways in which we can intervene in the course of disease. I feel like we're at the tip of the iceberg. And so I find it exciting to be in this field at this time when there's so much innovation, so much potential. And I think, one example of that, as we were discussing about machine learning approaches, is the ability to generate data at a scale that's never been able to be done before, but then also the computational approaches that then can leverage that data, like we're already seeing really exciting insights coming out of that. And I think that it's one of the topics that I've closely been following. Like at JP Morgan each year, I meet with innovative companies that are in this space, and every year it's kind of a snapshot at this moment in time. Where's the field at? And there's such a step change every year, and we're definitely not at the place yet where we can, use an algorithm to discover a medicine, but it's really moving in that direction where I think our scientists will be able to move more quickly and with more confidence than currently. So I think I hope to continue to increase the amount of innovation that's able to enter the ecosystem through Nucleate and through the new companies that come out of academia through that and the new leaders that emerge from that work. But then also through my work at Genentech, facilitate partnerships that aim to support and accelerate this innovation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Is there, are there things that we didn't cover that, about the company, about what you do that, you want to just kind of get it out there on, or did we pretty much cover everything that, that's on the top of your mind?
I think we covered most of it that was on my mind. Maybe one last thought is just, as I reflect on my career and on the work I do with Nucleate and with Genentech, the importance of the friends and mentors that I've developed in the biotech ecosystem is something that I continue to reflect on and be grateful for, like the huge impact. Like I'm so glad now, Deb, that you and I are connected. I think amidst a quickly changing field, it's immeasurably helpful to always have, a friend and a mentor that you can call to ask for advice or to learn about a new space. And so maybe a message to anyone who's listening is to be open to asking and receiving questions, and especially as you consider mentoring people who are earlier in their career, such as the students in Nucleate, I think we can all pay it forward in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful place to land, and it's a perspective I really share. When I got my first job, my father, this is back when we had business cards. My father told me to save every business card because you never knew, right? This was a network. You're building a lifetime of these relationships in this network. And I have a big box of business cards from, decades of relationships, which, some of these relationships, they ebb and they flow. But I definitely echo that. And that's great.
I still have paper business cards.
I know I give out business cards too. It's kind of old school, but it's important to make that connection too, right? Well, this has been, absolutely wonderful. And I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. I love what you started with Nucleate and that passion and that whole kind of line of innovation to, big corporations. I think sometimes we see these things as they're segmented, they're pieces and parts, but it really is a very connected ecosystem. And I love that that you still work across that. So I appreciate your time and your passion and what you're doing here. As we just bring this to a close, how can people get in contact with you if they want to chat, want to, find out more what you're doing? How can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me at Marissa Pettit Jones, as well as if you're interested in connecting with Nucleate. Nucleate is on LinkedIn or online on the website. So feel free to join and participate in that community. We'd love to speak with you and meet with you if that's of interest.
That's great. Thanks again. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks, Deb. Really appreciate the conversation and the invitation to speak on this podcast.
Thank you for joining Research Renaissance. For more information and to stay updated, subscribe for more episodes and visit our website at tofflertrust.org. Feel free to call us if you have any thoughts, suggestions, or just want to find out more about the Karen Toffler Charitable Trust. Until we meet again, onward and upward.